Very special guest from Nigeria. We have got Asika, who is joining us and will share his insights around his experience, specifically focused on the healthcare sector as such. But before we go to the questions, we'd like to formally introduce him. He's a seasoned healthcare commercial leader with strong expertise in medical technology, diagnostics, and healthcare infrastructure across Africa. He's currently serving as a commercial director at Franance Health Systems Limited, where he leads market expansion, OEM partnerships, and large-scale healthcare projects across the region. He has held prior leadership role at Thermo Fisher Scientific, Fujifilm Healthcare, and Philips. He has also driven public health initiatives, engagements, and medical technology adoption across multiple African markets. He is known in the industry for building strategic partnerships and expanding access to advanced healthcare solutions in emerging economies. Thank you so much, Ashika, for joining us and taking our time.
My pleasure.
Ashika, first thing, you have worked across several African markets in diagnostics, imaging, and laboratory systems. So, from your perspective on ground, what are the biggest gaps in healthcare infrastructure that African countries are still trying to address today?
Yeah, thanks Rishikesh for the opportunity to speak today on this really important topic. So I think some of the biggest gaps as far as the infrastructure in healthcare is concerned across Africa, but especially in Nigeria, because I like to focus on Nigeria because I'm Nigerian, right? It's majorly around, first of all, the lack of equipment, right? The lack of high-end equipment, the lack of diagnostic tools it's a big issue in Nigeria, and apart from that, I think one other issue that affects infrastructure is maintenance. So it's a scarce commodity in Nigeria to really get really good, well-trained biomedical engineer who can handle some of these high-end systems, like the CT scanners, the MRIs, or the big radiotherapy systems, linear accelerator, cath labs, and the likes. So these are two really big issues. The availability of the equipment, they're really so expensive to get them, and they're not available everywhere. You can find them in the major cities or the capital of the major cities, and that's it. And Nigeria is really big, right? There are about 36 states within the country, so you don't get to find this equipment everywhere. So that scarcity of this equipment leads to a lot of pressure, and you definitely would see the gap. Then, of course, the maintenance, and I think another issue that creates that is the financing. Financing is also a very big issue as far as the country is concerned. Financing of this equipment, financing of the health system really affects that, creates or increases that gap. Then personally, I think on my own, I've been working to see how I could contribute to the advancement of the digital infrastructure as far as the country is concerned, as far as the healthcare is concerned. And that also is one gap you'd see it. I think there are a lot of new startups nowadays that are trying to fill up that gap by providing telemedicine services, to be able to provide some of these healthcare services in far-to-reach areas. So the very infrastructure needed to be able to expand telemedicine is also one thing that's lacking. Activity is still an issue. Just the general technical know-how or the knowledge of the use of the technologies to be able to offer services in places where you can never find an X-ray is also one of those. So yeah, I think that pretty much is my idea of my understanding of the gaps. Right, it's majorly the gap in infrastructure, of the gap in the equipment itself, the biomedical engineers to be able to maintain the operation of the equipment for a long time, and financing is also a big problem. Predictability of financing is a big problem. Access to financing is also it's also a big problem, to be honest. And finally, the foundation of the digital infrastructure to help telemedicine grow is also one of those.
So this is very insightful, Ashika. And you have been closely involved with technologies like AI-enabled imaging, portable X-ray systems, which are used for diseases like tuberculosis. So how can technology accelerate disease detection and improve public health outcomes across Africa?
Yeah, that's something very interesting, right? Because technology is an enabler, right? It enables, a lot of things. And you can see how technology has accelerated case notification, increase in case notification of tuberculosis in Nigeria. Just to give you some perspective, Nigeria carries the heaviest burden of tuberculosis globally. All right.
Mm.
And what that means is for you to be able to find active TB cases, you need to, I mean, initially you need to do microscopy. And you can imagine how impossible it would be able to find all the active cases within 1 year, right? And using microscopy. So I think after some years, the tuberculosis control program supported and endorsed a pilot that was done using digital portable, ultra portable digital X-ray that is integrated with artificial intelligence to help detect tuberculosis in chest X-rays. And the result was really good, and that led to the expansion of procurement of more units of those kind of X-ray systems. And that greatly improved and grew case notification within Nigeria. But there's still a lot more to do. But we keep seeing new technology coming into to accelerate the not just disease detection, but accelerate it at scale, which is really important to be able to control and manage certain outbreaks. So, I mean, whenever there's an outbreak of any kind of disease, you definitely need technology, and it's really important. During my time at Thermo, that was
Yeah.
one of the things that I was burdened with, to be able to grow access to very essential diagnostic tools for countries to be able to detect certain outbreaks, to be able to manage outbreaks, to be able to prepare for emergencies, and to be strong enough to respond whenever there's an outbreak. And you can't do it without technology. You need technology to detect. You need technology to understand the disease. You need technology to be able to measure the work that is ongoing. So it's really important. It's really important. I mean, we've seen how much it has helped to support the the control of tuberculosis in Nigeria. And not just that, right? Even some other molecular diagnostic tools are used for other diseases like HIV
Yes.
and the rest. So it's really important. It's very important. And with the leverage of AI nowadays, we would see even more we'll see even more accelerated
Yes.
benefits of the use of technology, right? Not just in TB, right? In many other diseases, we'll start seeing how much AI can impact,
Yes.
disease detection, disease control, the speed at which healthcare providers can now, make a very good and confident clinical decision just from the use of AI. You would also see how quickly doctors or clinicians can take on what would be impossible in terms of the number or the scale of patients they can handle typically. One of the things that I hope to see one day in Nigeria is, doctors, radiologists especially, leveraging AI as a work tool. With AI nowadays, you can run through hundreds of X-rays or CT images, and you'll be able to detect all kinds of tumors, all kinds of cancers, all kinds of abnormalities in those images. And that would greatly improve, diagnosis, accuracy of diagnosis, speed of diagnosis, which definitely would highly impact positively on the outcome, right? So yeah, it's really important, and that's one area where I've been playing in, and I look forward to seeing how I can contribute to keep advancing that space, because yeah, that's the future of healthcare as far as technology is concerned.
And it will also make healthcare more affordable as well, because since the speed increases, so I think the prices will also come down.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think so. Price was one thing, speed was one thing, quality of diagnosis was one thing. And I think it should also help penetrate into the interior regions of Nigeria as well, where there may not be healthcare facilities at those levels. So it will also democratize healthcare in some way, Asika, like.
Absolutely. I mean, during my time at Fujifilm, when I was actively um, advocating for the use of Fujifilm's portable digital X-rays with AI for detection of tuberculosis, there were instances that I had to I had to join the health workers to really deep far communities that are like hours away from the city, and you
Yeah.
could see the impact of those tools, right? Like you could see how quickly they
Yes.
find abnormalities. And, I mean, you're looking for patients or, that have active TB cases. And we ended up finding so many other abnormalities like fractured ribs, enlarged hearts, things that, patients or people were living with and they had no idea. Right. So that's the only way to be able to do it. Technology is the only way to be able to do it. And not just with AI, even with telemedicine nowadays, right? There are a lot of new startups in Nigeria that are supporting or leveraging technology to be able to break into these far to reach areas, to provide consultation from doctors who live in the cities, to provide referrals, right? To be able to refer them to tertiary hospitals, to bigger private hospitals that can manage cases that are beyond the primary healthcare level, because most of those communities that are far away from the city centers have only the primary healthcare centers. And the primary healthcare centers or the primary healthcare system in Nigeria is not built to manage complex cases, right? It's built to be able to manage majorly just some primary cases, then refer to some of the bigger hospitals within reach. So telemedicine is also helping to increase the rate of referral, and that would greatly reduce the percentage of mortality from quite a number of diseases. Like you can't even quantify the number of diseases that, or number of cases that telemedicine is helping to reduce mortality rate. So I think it's really important. I think it's something that's not just Nigeria, but many governments in Africa should support entrepreneurs and founders who are working in that space, you know, also provide the infrastructure needed, right? Ensuring that connectivity is available, ensuring that the use of technology is, it's less, I wouldn't say less regulated, not over regulated to the point of, killing innovation. So yeah, that's what I would say.
This is great. And Asika, you kind of your work involves partnering with global medical technology companies and introducing solutions into the African healthcare systems. So, what challenges do global healthcare manufacturers face when they are entering into the African markets, and how can those challenges be addressed?
Well, to be honest, I mean, the challenges are a lot when it comes to global health tech manufacturers trying to break into African markets. We would always use Nigeria as a case study because, that's where I'm based. That's where I love every other African country, of course, but, Nigeria is one country I understand the most. So I would say, first of all, local registration, local regulations different from how most of the global manufacturers would expect. So it's a little bit different from what they would expect. So it takes longer. It's a little bit more complex. So you don't always, but it's always advisable. It's always recommended that you get someone who is sort of a local expert to be able to help advise, to be able to help you navigate the system. If not, it will be, overly expensive and it will take much longer than it should. So that's the first part. It is complex. It is lengthy. The second part is, the second part of the challenge is that most of the medtech companies would experience breaking into African market is the volatility of the foreign exchange.
Yes.
Because patients will pay in local currencies, you would have to convert that currency to an international currency of the global health tech company to be able to purchase the equipment, right? So that's exchange is a problem in many African countries where some of these preferred currencies are scarce and expensive. So that's one thing. It brings a lot of pressure and risk to the business. So that's one other challenge that most global health tech companies will face. And I mean, there's also the parts that has to do with parallel importation or gray markets, where you have a particular brand, and there are unofficial channels where some unofficial proper distributors are able to bring in, same equipment or even pre-owned equipment, right, to compete with the ones that are brand new and legitimately from the factory of the manufacturers. That also puts a lot of pressure on the demand, right, and the market share, because a customer who isn't who isn't enlightened would think that this is a better deal, to get it for maybe $100,000 up to $300,000 or $400,000 to get, the original brand new system that can be maintained and comes with warranty and all of that. So that also is a problem because, it puts a lot of pressure on the market to, go for those systems. And that's a big problem that most medtech manufacturers would experience all across Africa. I think part of the solution would be to get a strong company, get a strong manufacturer, distributor on ground or partner on ground that understands the system. Usually they would help to be able to navigate issues around foreign exchange. For the power market one, or the gray market one, I would say that the manufacturers, it would be good to have a representative in the country, sort of country manager or regional manager. That goes a long way to help, because such a person can, relate to the government, relate to the Ministry of Health, to be able to, uh, you know, show face and say, we are the real representative of this company, and these are our selected partners on ground. So the government knows who to deal with,
Yes.
and such arrangement will come with, of course, letter of authorization and all of that. The government would be aware that this is the company rep, these are the distributors, these are the people we should deal with. And that could also be a sort of letter that could go across to all the federal or the government public tertiary hospitals, so they're aware of who to deal with, rather than dealing with those who, pretend or come from the gray market. Then for the forex part, it has to be dealt with. You can deal, they can find a way to solve that problem by working with a strong local distributor. That's probably the best solution for that. Even for the regulatory and the registration part, you also can get a cool consultant to help, or even a good distributor that can help. So you can't just solve this problem. Can 100% be solved by having a strong local representative or a strong local distribution partner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is very helpful for everybody, who is looking to enter into the African geography. This is pretty helpful. Asika, we see most of the healthcare initiatives across Africa involve collaboration between government, private companies, and international organizations. In your experience, what makes these partnerships successful?
Yeah. So I would say the first and most important part that makes it successful is the continuity, sustainability, or having the political will, if I should put it that way. There has to be a sense, there has to be that factor of continuity, right? Most of the PPPs that I've seen, and most of these sort of placement arrangements, and of all sorts of arrangements that takes shape and form of a PPP, usually succeed when there is continuity. Because the way the system, governance system works in Nigeria, and the administration of each government works in Nigeria, is in the span of 4 years. So if after the fourth year there's a new government with a new party that comes, with its own people, its own leadership, it changes everything. And if the agreement doesn't have some strength to be able to protect the investors, it's definitely going to crash, because a new government comes and they have a new vision, they have a new way of working, they have their own partners that they would prefer to work with. And if your system doesn't have a really strong agreement, if it doesn't have a sense of continuity in it, it's definitely going to be a problem. So I would say that, most successful PPPs in Nigeria have always been designed to be long term. And due to that, they usually would succeed. Um, yeah, it has to be long term. It has to be long term for it to succeed. It has to be long term. There has to be some level of political will, and it needs to have a lot of partners. And that's also another thing. When you have an arrangement or a PPPA, and you do it in silo, it's going to be a problem over time. So it has to have a lot of partners involved in it, because the more partners you have in it, the more difficult it is for anybody to just crumble it. Right? So it needs to have a lot of partners. It needs to have a lot of interest from several entities, the government agency, the hospital itself. And sometimes when you have a lot of partners involved, it usually would stand the test of time. So I mean, from my experience, I don't think there's any other one that works out without political will for transitions, without it designed for long-term sustainability. Right? These are the ones that I've seen that are still existing to today. Even some PPPs signed that are up to 10 years, up to 15 years, that are still functional. Then another thing that I think would be great to also add would be to be hands-on, to be involved, not just have a partnership where the equipment would come and just hospital, you have to be involved in the operations. You have to be involved in the operations of the system. That way, it also helps for you to be able to sustain it, for you to be able to maintain, use of the equipment. So it has to have a long-term nature. You have to be involved
Yes.
in it, right? And it needs to have a strong political will because of transitions that happens. And you need to have a lot of stakeholders involved. A lot of agencies should be involved. A lot of institutions, associations sort of should also be aware and be involved. And that would also give you some level of security.
Yes. Got it. And you recently kind of helped expand operations into new African markets within a very short time frame. So when entering into a new country in Africa, Ashika, like what factors determine whether a healthcare business or project will succeed?
I think deep understanding of the healthcare needs in that market.
Hmm.
Like you need to understand how that market operates, where that particular market is at, and where it needs to be. And when you're entering the market, you don't enter, blindly. You enter with, good insights. Right? Um, there are countries in Africa where, you don't go with certain really high-end, high-tech equipment because they're not just there yet,
Yes.
right? So there has to be some level of deep knowledge of the market. There has to be some level of deep knowledge of the market. For me, what has helped me to succeed whenever I break into new markets is, having someone local there who has known the market um, for a while and having access to the leaders. That's also another thing that
Yes.
is key for success. You need to have access to the leaders in the market. You need to have access to the director of public health,
Yes.
and the public health lab, the minister, the heads and directors of several agencies and several disease control agencies. You need to be able to engage them before you break in to understand what their goal and objectives are for, that, what are they trying to achieve? Are they trying to go into vaccine research and development? So, the kind of solutions you can offer. Are they looking at, national level screening for certain diseases? Are they looking at upgrading the laboratories to be able to strengthen their laboratory systems? So it's really important for you to understand where the market is at, and also to look at how payments for healthcare is done in the country in terms of insurance. Is said like a really strong insurance, which directly translate to a stronger private sector, or is there a weak governance system and regulatory system that also would hint that there will be a lot of gray market importation into the country. So there has to be a very deep knowledge of that particular country, that particular market. You need to have somebody on the ground to be able to tell you the truth. You need to be able to speak to the leaders in that market sincerely, openly, let them know what you're trying to achieve. These are the solutions you have. Find out how it translates to where the market is at and how it can contribute to the development of healthcare. The thing is most African countries will open up their doors if they see that what you're bringing would help develop the system rather than, you trying
Yes.
to fit, a square peg in a round hole. It's simple.
And that makes a lot of sense because that is what is the need of the day. It needs partnership rather than transactions. Asika, uh, at the end, when you look ahead, where do you see the biggest opportunities for innovation in Africa's healthcare?
Okay. That is a good question because
No, every question was good, Asika.
this one is the best one. This one is the best one because first of all, I would say you start with looking at the new techs that are enabling the disruptions or the quick changes in healthcare. You look at those new techs, those new technologies that are coming into the market. AI, for example, artificial intelligence is a no-brainer. It is the future. It is one of those future opportunities as far as healthcare is concerned. No doubt. Healthcare, AI usually would change every industry. And healthcare is one of those industries that usually will adopt new technology faster because we always need new therapy, right? To be able to treat diseases or improve the outcome of treatment of diseases. AI is one of those opportunities. How can I embed AI into hospital management systems or electronic medical records to, to be able to help me to make faster decisions? How can I embed AI into my full radiology suite,
Yes.
right? To be able to help me detect disease faster, help me improve my workflow, help me do all sort of things. So AI is going to be in literally every piece of equipment in just a matter of maybe 5 to 10 years from now. And this is coming, right? This is like, there's no way you can stop it because it's going to be so useful and so beneficial to the patients that the hospitals will have no choice than to be able to adopt it.
Yes.
Because if something works and is making the lives of patients better, the hospitals will definitely adopt it, right? They will definitely adopt it. Telemedicine is, it's really big in Nigeria now, and it's going to get bigger, right? It's going to open up possibilities in areas where there's been a lot of difficulty, where there's been a lot of gaps. For example, elderly care has a huge gap, not just in Nigeria, but in Africa as a whole. And, there are some new companies that are coming up with ideas on how to be able to provide care to the elderly at an affordable rate, right? Through telemedicine platforms, right? To be able to have caregivers visit the home, take vital signs, check the health of the patient, provide companionship, which is good for their psyche. Yeah, that's telemedicine is going to open up a lot of things. It's going to help fill up a lot of gaps that are existing. What other future opportunities do I see? I think there are lots of opportunities in development as well. In biotech development, there are a lot of opportunities there because there's a strong research ecosystem in Africa, right? There's a very strong research ecosystem, and there are still a lot of therapies, a lot of drugs that were manufactured without a significant representation of Africans for clinical trials. So there are a lot of work being done nowadays to show and to prove that some of these drugs are not optimized for the African DNA. So that open up opportunities for development of new therapy and new clinical trials to be able to create drugs that would work for Africans, for native Africans. That is also a very big opportunity because if you're able to prove scientifically that a particular drug wasn't optimized for this population and you're able to provide a new solution that works, nobody will be able to say anything because it's like, this is what works for us. So there's going to be a lot of investment in biotech, even in diagnostics manufacturing within Africa, because every country is now looking at how to have some level of health sovereignty, some level of health security within their population, within their country. And there's going to be a need to be able to develop their own tools, develop their own drugs, develop their own biotech products. So there are opportunities in local manufacturing, of course, for vaccines, for all kinds of therapies. Opportunities as well in telemedicine, right? Just the way there was a boom in fintech across Africa, there's definitely going to be a boom in med tech as well, telemedicine tech as well across Africa, right? The reason why there was such a boom in fintech in not just in Nigeria but across Africa is because the infrastructure was there. The infrastructure to support it was there. So there has to be some level of support as well to develop the infrastructure for health as well. And if that is done, you see a lot of clinicians, a lot of entrepreneurs who start building solutions, start building things that could greatly scale and help the lives of people living in Africa. So I think for me, these are like the three big or four big areas. I definitely say I think it has one of the biggest opportunities as far as opportunities in Nigeria, opportunities in Africa as far as health is concerned. Research and development, very big, very, very big. Investments in research would definitely come back 10 times over again. Manufacturing, local manufacturing of biotech products. There's a company in Nigeria called Codex Pharma that has been investing a lot in developing some of these products, like a glucometer, locally in Nigeria. They're working on several kits like the HIV rapid test kits. That these companies, when they develop such products, they get some level of validation done locally. We see that they're comparable to international or global manufacturers. You'd see a lot of Nigerians who definitely patronize. A lot of Nigerians, would definitely patronize local content. The government itself would also support. right? They will also support. So the opportunities in local manufacturing for sure. And telemedicine is growing. It's going to keep growing. It's going to keep growing. It's going to keep expanding into new clinical areas. Yeah, and I think that's it. As long as the government is supporting
Mm.
such innovation, so as long as the government is supporting such companies to do more, you would see more people would come in to create new companies that will go a long way to really help. Right? And this is not just for medical device, even in pharma, right?
Yeah.
Even in pharma, in the pharma industry, there's still going to be a lot of startups coming up, leveraging technology to be able to bring a difference to the system. Yeah, pretty much that.
Thank you so much, Ashika, for joining us and sharing all these insights.
Oh, perfect. All right.